Hi everyone, my name is Chris Howard. I am the head of the OSPO at a company called EPAM Systems. We're a software engineering company, but working quite a lot in the financial services space and a member of Finos as well. And I'm delighted to be joined today by our two amazing panelists, also from the financial services sector. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves because I think you tell a much richer story. So I'll pass the mic over and then we're going to jump straight in. It's going to be super chilled, nice informal. It's a Wednesday afternoon. None of this repetitive, boring panel. We're going to learn some great things from our two panelists and have a bit of a nice chat. So straight over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Chris, and what a lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea, and as James very kindly introduced me, I'm the engineering manager at NatWest, especially in the open banking space. And what I look after are loads of the accounts and customer data that we have as part of open banking. Probably you've heard about open banking. It's actually been 6 years since we've been live. I could not believe that it was 13th of January 2018 when all the banks managed to go live with all the open banking propositions. And since then, I've been looking at a lot of what do we do in the space of open banking? How do we take it actually to the next level? And my big passion is around customer experience and developer experience. In my free time, I do enjoy a bit of indie gaming, so I'm trying to develop a few games myself. If anyone enjoys that, feel free to reach out to me later. I would love to talk a bit more about that. And I'll pass over to you, Jen.
Thank you. I'm Jen Devonshire. I'm a senior manager in platform engineering at Anaplan, which is a SaaS company that provides enterprise planning software for financial institutions. I've worked previously in fintech and consulting. I've seen kind of increased adoption of open source, sometimes by design, sometimes because we're on containers and it just happens. So I've had a really great conference so far. Excited to be in this discussion. I've loved what I've heard in this room already today and from Andrea. So, yep, that's me. I'll go back to Chris.
Well, I'll speak very loud and I'll leave the microphone on that side.
Do we not need the recording? Do they need you?
So can you pass it? Do we just have the one mic? Yeah. Okay, fine. We'll keep doing the round robin. It's fine. Oh, amazing. Great.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
Excellent. So let's just jump straight onto what you were saying then about the adoption of open source. And I think this is what we're all here for. Let's hear a little bit about how open technologies have been changing your organizations, perhaps over the last few years, but also what that means for the financial services and regulated industry. So let's go straight back to you, Jen, around kind of what you're doing over at Anaplan.
Yes, it is working. So I guess we're not huge on the kind of open source advocacy side. I've just generally worked places where, open source is just part of the infrastructure and platform environments. And I guess, it's interesting to see what's happening in the future. I feel like everywhere I've worked so far, it's been a case of, on the contribution side, not sure about that. How about you? If you want to contribute, it's outside of company time, it's outside of company IP, it's, make sure it's just a game and you tell us that you're doing it. Whereas what James was saying earlier about, actually integrating that into, the institutions, that's really interesting for, that's what I see the future as. But it sounds like it's kind of the present now in some places, but I think the status quo is still very different on the contribution side. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Andrea?
I'd probably agree with you that I think it's an evolution actually of what has been happening so far. And as back to some of the points that were mentioned earlier this afternoon, I do think that banking is still operating on how do we make things more open, and especially in the financial services, how do you try to get more contribution in? And by thinking about OSPO and thinking about our operating model, we will start seeing that more and more. I do think though that it definitely has a lot of opportunities going into the future. And I think when it comes to especially open banking and where we've seen things growing is just actually making things more accessible to people. And going back to the point of what open source actually does, it's not just being in one mobile application on an online banking application. It's actually making things where people actually need us to be. And if you have an Apple device right now and you look in your Apple Wallet, you can probably see that you can already see your transactions, your account data and everything without needing to go into a mobile application, which I think this is what the point of open source and open community is, just developing on what's already there and taking this to the whole level. But I agree with you. It's a journey and it's an evolution of learning on where we started and keeping things very close and internal to actually thinking about this is a real opportunity for all of us.
So people are going to think this is pre-planned, and of course it is. So on that, as we heard, open banking, you've been doing some amazing work around building an SDK, a software development kit. Tell us a little bit more about what that means for NatWest, but also how contributing things like that ultimately in the future back to the industry is going to help with that whole developer experience.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for the question. And I think that James kindly already alluded to that as part of the presentation earlier about how do we really adopt open source in the organization. So what we've actually noticed post the adoption of open banking and us implementing open banking is we keep on seeing that we have all the Postman collection available, we have all the specifications ready, everything is done by the book. However, it's still taking so long for things to be adopted. And I think that if we all know something today is that we want it fast and we want it now. And as developers, I think that we can all relate. We want to get things live. We don't want to spend time reading documentation. We don't want to spend time to think and look into errors unless you really enjoy testing. Another story. But what I would say is what we started to look at is actually how do we make all of those things more accessible to people? How do we make things easier? And we looked into especially developing an SDK, a software developer kit, that actually allows the integration with the open banking APIs to happen immediately. There'd be simple examples on how do you get your accounts, how do you get your transactions, how do you make a single immediate payment, and you would not be contributing to any malicious intent, you would not be getting any unsecure customer data. It would just be a simple way to consume the APIs and get to the market really fast. Another point that I do want to make on this is that what this allows is actually a lot more collaboration within the industry, because what we've noticed is we keep on seeing the same players over and over again using the APIs, and we really want, the point of open banking is make it open for everyone. So the more that we encourage more parties to be part of this, the more we encourage innovation.
Amazing. I mean, I'm learning a lot already, so it's great to hear. And let's go straight over to you, Jen, on that whole. Let's take the developer toolkit a step further and talk about the developer experience. And the question, certainly as we were doing some kind of pre-preparation, was around, you did a lot in the developer kind of relations experience space. What should we and perhaps audience members be doing to think about ensuring our developers have the right tools, the right support available to them to help with this evolving landscape as open becomes more of the kind of the norm? So what are your thoughts in that space?
I guess it's kind of like a snowball effect, you know, as more people adopt and more people contribute, the experience organically improves for our developers. And I mean, it's for developers being able to use open source gives them that ability to extend and fix something that's existing. My team do a lot with the Kubernetes operator SDK, so they have kind of that tool available to them to then build on, and then they've built some really great stuff around kind of deploying Kubernetes resources to abstract away the complexity for other developers in our organization. I think just continuing to engage means that the experience gets better.
I love that, abstract away the complexity. I'm going to steal that one for my KB page. But let's pick that up a little bit around culture. So actually you're saying that perhaps some of those people who are a little slower to adopt or need a bit more swaying persuasion in the idea of bringing open forward, one of the values you've just called out there is about getting rid of some of those complexities. Is there anything at NatWest that you've had to kind of champion or do a bit more flag waving? And I know James has told us a great deal already, to perhaps get a few more people on that journey with you around how are you really advocating for open, particularly in an industry where often there's a real reluctance around compliance, governance, security. What are some of the things perhaps you've been involved in?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that I will actually quote some of the previous speeches that were in here, because I think that it's just so relevant in the way that we're looking at things. And I'd say that there were 3 main points that were mentioned earlier from Rob, if I remember correctly. And they're around like building up the knowledge. And I think it's educating people around open source and thinking about what does it actually mean. And I think, to your point, security was probably one of the biggest challenges when it came to everything we're doing in open banking. But educating people about what it actually does and the opportunities in there were really, really helpful. The second point was around showing the way, and having a full team committed to doing this, again, really allowed us to show by living that this is what the APIs are going to be doing, and it's all secure and safe. And then telling a different story, I think that is probably the most relevant thing, is that so many times we think about, oh, what's the security issue? But it's probably around what are actually the opportunities. And in my view, personally, security is actually going to be much better the more that we engage in a community and the more that we look at open source. Because if I think about security issues, I'll probably be looking from one perspective. But the more views that we get on here is just going to make sure that we take care of all the security flaws.
And I always say, I promise I'm never going to ask the same question to the panelists. I think it gets a bit monotonous, but I'd love to hear if there's a bit of a different angle at Anaplan. Is there any other kind of persuasion tactics or things you've been trying to push forward to get more people on that boat with you?
I think, a lot of places it's around engaging with open source in a way that everybody's comfortable with at all levels, including those who are accountable for the security and performance of the platform. We have, customers that we need to make sure that are happy with everything that's going on. So, if we're engaging with open source, we'll generally have it wrapped in like an enterprise contract. For example, we have Pacona products and we have a support contract with Pacona. And spoke earlier in this room about Pacona's take on open source. And I think we're just mindful about how we're engaging.
Excellent. So let's turn up the temperature a little bit. Let's get into some real detail. So back to you, Andrea. Obviously, we've heard from Finos. We're sponsored by the OIN as well. So it's all about bringing people together as the financial services industry evolves, to collaborate, that kind of start to work really much closer together, which often is something a bit reluctant in the financial services space. But would it be brash then for me to say that your view is that the future is all about, I've got it written down, open standards, interoperability, seamless integration? And is that still very kind of optimistic blue sky, or do you really think that's the direction we're going in with some of these initiatives we're hearing about? I
do believe that is the future. Indeed.
Amazing.
Because especially when it comes to open source and everything that it stands for, what we've noticed, especially in the implementation of open banking and the way that NatWest has done it, is that it really helped us take it forward. As we're talking about financial industry, NatWest is just a small part of the whole industry. We have 19 million customers, but still that is not tackling the entire UK market. So I think the point of standards that is really helping us make sure that this is actually encompassing of the whole industry. We've done a few things on our side to think about how do we take the open banking APIs to the next level, and we've done a few more innovation projects on our side where we can actually notice that there's probably a slower adoption to our open banking APIs, is that other companies and other banks would not be adhering to the same standards, which is why I do believe that by managing both the standards as well as innovation is how we manage to get a fully adopted and a market of opportunities.
Excellent. Anything else on that one, Jen, at all?
I'd agree that, the regulation and the standards are going to be really, really important going forward.
I love it. Regulation. That's my... Oh, there's a few grumbles from the audience, but that's it. So as we continue to disrupt, as we come to conferences like this, we all shout about open, we get super excited about it. We've been hearing about AI and policy. I mean, we've heard too much about AI and policy, perhaps, some of us. What role does the regulatory body and kind of compliance and governance and all of this, where do you think that nice kind of balancing act is going to be in an industry that is already kind of reputationally kind of loving the regulation, the red tape necessarily, engineering different mindset, but where do you think that relationship's going to sit as we move forward and continue to ride this wave? It's a difficult one. Go ahead.
Yes, I would say, because everything that we started in the space of open banking was very much regulatory led, and initially there was a lot of reticence in the space of being like, what is it actually going to mean? And I think that loads of banks were also very much like, what does this actually mean for banking? Because back to the point I think was mentioned around developers wanting to own the code, banks want to own their data. It's quite true. So as soon as open banking started, it was just like, where do we sit as a bank? And I think that's kind of why having the regulator at the point of let's look at this and implement it in the same way across the industry was really, really helpful. So I'd say leading, but also listening to what the companies have to say. Because going back to the point around innovation and around taking things to the next level, one of the latest APIs that are available are around variable recurring payments, and you can read all about them on the Bank of API and learn a lot more about how to do payments in a much seamless way. JRock lately have been encouraging more banks to be thinking about how do you take this to the next level? Why do we still need to be putting our cards on files? Why do I need to go and look at my card reader? Why can't I just do everything digitally? You can see I love my digital life. But that's probably, it's kind of the point of starting the conversation, getting the topic, and then bringing all the companies and all the parties to contribute to that and think about, same as code, versioning, different releases and learning.
Amazing. So we're going to go kind of full circle back to the beginning. We were talking about all of the exciting kind of significant changes that Open's brought to your organizations, but it can't all be kind of rosy, kind of fluffy world. There must be some challenges or obstacles. So is there anything you've come across perhaps in your experience, Jen, that's been a real challenge that I think would be a nice lessons learned for the audience?
I mean, kind of as I alluded to earlier, you often find that the accountable parties are less keen to adopt something without fully understanding all of the implications. And, sometimes, there's that attitude that potentially you end up with a higher total cost of ownership with lots of different open source products than you might if you just tie into a vendor. But I guess one of the, real things that we've been able to show with using open source is being a SaaS company, we want to be able to deploy on different kind of cloud environments, whether it's an on-prem data center or AWS, GCP, public cloud. And we often find like the open source tooling can allow you to build something that's totally cloud agnostic. And often, you can even swap out some of those open source tools for others without it impacting on, the actual services that it's providing. So that's kind of a real benefit that we can use to help drive it forward. And that's where we do see the benefit of continuing to use some level of open source mindfully.
Excellent. And what about NatWest? Obviously smashing forward with all of the stuff we've just heard around open source, but it can't, again, all be perfect. There's got to be something that's making you grumble.
There
James,
always is.
Close your ears, James.
Probably the thing that I would absolutely love to see going forward, and I'm absolutely sure that having OSPO and having James in the organization will really help, is around maintainability. And I think that's just something that we suffer a lot in the open source. And there is a lot of enthusiasm at the start. Loads of people want to be part of it. Loads of people want to contribute. However, what we've seen, and that is probably across the space, is that it's really hard to maintain it and really hard to keep the engagement at the same level. And I really believe that by having the OSPO, having the community, actually going through the training, having the recognition for having contributed as well, which honestly I think that it's not mentioned enough, that we should be recognizing people for contributing. Is not something that just comes naturally to everyone, will really help us go forward.
Amazing. So in true presenter style, I'm going to reuse your words, Jen. You said understanding the implications, and perhaps now you understand the implications of being on a panel with me, is that we're coming into our wrap-up and quick fire round before we go to audience questions. Hopefully you've had a chance to prepare, because you know the last one's a tricky one. But in no more than 3 words, I'd love to know what you think is the most important aspect of open source when we think about the future of finance. No more than 3 words, either of you jump in.
worked really hard, but I went for focus where needed. And my point is kind of, anything that can be shared, you can share, and then you can really innovate on your competitive advantage.
Amazing.
Is that less than 3 words?
No, focus where needed. Was it?
Yeah, focus where needed.
That's 3 words. We're good.
I was thinking very hard about this, and I wrote 3 words, but I think that I'm going to change them right now on the spot, which is challenge your biases, which is probably what I'd say that in the open source is probably the most important. I think this kind of came as part of the conversations that have happened today, is that we all have our internal bias when we are approaching code. We have our internal biases when we're approaching problems, so open source should really be the way forward.
Amazing. So our penultimate question, so prepare yourselves. In 10 years, open technologies will have transformed the financial services sector by... Surprise me. Tell us all.
I would probably say that it should be around accessibility. And I think that open source will really make services more accessible for people. I think that we're finally going to come to the point where diversity and inclusion is key to everything that we're doing. Not everyone is the same. So I really think that open source will just enable us to be thinking about the people that need more accessible services.
Amazing. You don't escape either, Jen, on this one. 10 years' time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess what I was saying in my 3 words, it'll enable collaboration in order to kind of free up resource for innovation and, yeah.
Amazing. A shout out to our sponsors, the Open Invention Network. And our final question before the audience have their opportunity, and I'm going to answer this one first to set the scene. So if you could compare open source in finance to a famous landmark, what would it be and why? Are you ready for this? Prepare yourselves. So we're in London, so I've said the Shard. It's fairly new compared to other landmarks. Seems so obvious and visible, but so many of us haven't been to the top or engaged with it. But when we do, I'm sure we'll all go, why didn't I do that sooner? Okay, so that's the level we're at here, okay? So, final question, if you could compare open source in finance to a famous landmark, what would it be and why?
I can't do one as good as yours, Chris, but mine's also in London. I went for the British Museum because all of our secrets are on display and there might be a little bit of debate on ownership.
Oh, very good. Very good.
That one is a hard one to top, so Jen. I went a bit outside of the UK, and you can probably tell by my accent that it would probably not be a surprise. So I went for Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which is the famous church, because I really believe it's a contribution from many different architects that has now been going on for more than almost 100 years in 2026, and it's never finished. And that's how I feel about open source, is that it's a continuous contribution and hopefully at one point finish, but you never know.
There we go. And I'm sure everyone will be thinking about that on their own. Amazing. Well, it's now time for the audience questions, so please no more landmark-based questions. I think we've ticked that box well and truly, but we'd love to have any questions from the audience.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear some comments on more than open source software in finance. I actually showed the grumpy face you referred to when you mentioned regulation, but it's still we have the open API and not everyone can use it, which is not helping innovation. But I'm talking about other the open processes in banking. I'm coming from a grumpy consumer point of view, and specifically for NatWest Bank actually. 6 years ago, I applied for a bank account 3 times. I have the 999 credit score, everything's perfect on my file. And NatWest Bank told me, no, we can't open your account. And I asked why. I say, we can't tell you. Goodbye. And I apply, maybe it's, credit score. I go check my credit score. No, it's perfect. But why? No, we won't tell you. And I tried it in a year and 2 years and 3 years, whatever. And yeah, and I don't, where is the accountability in this process, decision-making process? And can I some kind of benefit as a consumer if it become more open? Or are there any risks related to that?
Thank you. I assume this question is for Jen, right? Not for me, because I'm only joking. I think that it's definitely back to the points probably at the start is like a snowball effect. And we definitely are starting to look more, how do we open more and more services and actually what are the ones that really provide value? And back to the point around accessibility, I agree with you that banking should be accessible to everyone and we should be making sure that everyone has the right level of knowledge on why things are happening. When that will happen, it will definitely be a conversation with the legal team. However, I really believe with the point of open banking and everything in API space that we should be looking at how do we make those things available. I know that that's not really the answer probably that you're looking for, but...
I mean, I'll build on that in the sense that I think actually as open source continues to be adopted and we talk about software, etc., it has to go hand in hand with transparency, this idea around accessibility. So no longer are we living in a world whereby black box, for want of a better expression, is the thing. Everything's in the open, everything's collaborative. Yes, it's a big ask to start publishing projects on GitHub and working in the open fully, particularly in this industry. But you're right, I think even when we talk about data frameworks and models, becoming more transparent is only the way forward. So. That's what we've just been talking about. Any more questions at all?
So the key to success is obviously adoption. How do you engage with the fintech community, with other banks, to encourage adoption? What's the incentive for people to want to engage and stay engaged?
I'll be taking this one as well, Jen, but if you do want to build on, and I definitely do. So I would say there are two parts of this. First of all is customer retention. I'd say the industry has changed so much so that it's no longer, if you sign up to a bank, to the point that was just mentioned earlier, you stay with the bank forever. People will be moving banks and they will be moving accounts if they see that the experience is not the one that they need. So I'd say that at the industry level, we really need to be mindful of that because there are so many switch accounts right now and everyone is like, well, I can get £100 if I switch over to TSB from NatWest, so why wouldn't I do that? It is the customer experience that really matters. And then I'd probably say it's also around the commerciality of the services that we are doing. I'd say that we are so often using MasterCard, we're using Visa, we're using all of those third parties. How about connecting directly to the organization and to the bank? That will again really help with the adoption and also with performance because things are going to be a lot faster. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jen, to that?
I don't think so. I was having a look. Who was it? Bruce Parron, who was talking about kind of post-open yesterday in the plenaries. I thought that was quite an interesting discussion about how we could incentivize contribution and make things better for those contributing and what it does look like in the future. It's hard to know how we'll get there, but yeah, that was an interesting discussion as well.
Oh, okay, one more question. Yeah, I think. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm just interested when you're looking at open source technologies and bringing them in. Clearly, there's a lot of discussion about them within the bank. I'm curious what the main negatives are or the blockers are that are brought up when you're thinking of bringing on an open source technology.
That's a great question and one that I'd say it probably depends on the technology that we're talking about. I think that James has presented previously a slide with like all the different open banking, open source actually technologies that we have available in NatWest and how we've contributed to various ones. So I'd probably say that it depends on what the technology is and when it comes to the adoption of it. Most of the times it actually goes through our legal and procurement team when it comes to the contracts, but that's probably the easiest answer.
Thank you very much. I mean, thank you so much to both of our panelists for what I certainly felt was a very engaging conversation. I got lots of notes down and some phrases I'm definitely borrowing. Thank you for those incredible landmark responses. And of course, thank you to our audience as well for joining us. Please feel free to link up with us on LinkedIn. We're obviously more than happy to carry on the conversation, share some of our further experience, but it's been a real privilege to join you today and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.